All right, we need to talk about head trauma and body conditioning because the fact is that videos keep surfacing of particularly boxing trainers basically throwing on a set of gloves, having their guys just stand there and then taking a bunch of headshots. Problem is that while it may reduce the fear of getting hit because you get acclimated to it, your brain doesn't actually condition to taking the hits. It actually ends up causing brain trauma, and that brain trauma can over time become, CTE. You can get concussions. Repeated concussions are bad. Despite the fact that we don't have really any direct causal links to CTE and concussions, like we don't know the actual full-on mechanism of it. The fact is that they have pretty much only been linked to head trauma. And when we look at that's something important to think of, right? Now, I talked about this a long time ago when we discussed the use of boxing gloves. And the fact is that a 16-ounce boxing glove and the padding on it really doesn't actually provide enough deceleration for the added weight to the fist, and thus makes it unsafe. This is something that I really, really disagree with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson when he talks about going up to 16 or 18-ounce gloves. It's like, dude, you're just actually adding potential brain injury to your training partners. It's not safer, it's more dangerous. And there's a couple of reasons for that, right? Because yes, clearly the padding decelerates things. The problem is that the added weight offsets that. And so there's that side of it. And then there's also the side of the fact that you feel like you can punch harder with a glove and you feel like you can take more hits with a glove. So you get an increase in risky behavior as well as the mechanical disadvantage. And then on top of that, one more piece, and I don't know about you, but, obviously in combat sports, sometimes you just have to train in boxing gloves because you may have a kickboxing or boxing competition coming up where you have to be wearing boxing gloves. And that's fine. It's to be expected. The point is, don't do it more than you need to. But the big thing here is the fact that, like, when you're sparring, these don't allow you to feel as much either, which often means that, like, if you're trying to spar light and you can't even register that you hit the guy, you're encouraging yourself to hit harder than necessary in order to make up for the deficit in being able to feel. There are so many things about wearing padded gloves that actually creates kind of a problem for the sparring. And now, look, if you do the numbers out, and I know the numbers aren't perfect, but if you do the numbers out, MMA gloves are actually considerably safer. And then the safety striking gloves, which have the same depth of padding as boxing gloves, but about half the weight, are considerably safer. Now, granted, look, if you are going into a competition that needs boxing gloves, you have to train with boxing gloves. You have to train specifically. But if you're not, if you're going into MMA, or if you're doing this recreationally, or you're training for the streets, then honestly, you want to deal with the bare minimum of things. Now, let's circle back around to the conditioning side of it. Pretty much everything below your neck can be conditioning. I mean, even your neck can be conditioned, just you probably don't want to do impact conditioning on your neck because of the cervical vertebrae. I mean, you're just talking about kind of an unnecessary amount of potential things that can go wrong there. Muscular conditioning, I think, is better than impact conditioning there. But really kind of below the neck, you can do all the impact conditioning that you want. Yes, technically speaking, body conditioning, if done with the inappropriate load, could lead to hernia in people who are prone to hernia. But to my understanding, hernias are largely genetically predetermined, and then it's the stress on top of that actually creates it. Although enough trauma, can do all sorts of damage. So who knows there? Be careful with it. The fact is, though, we are incredibly adaptive creatures, and we can definitely adapt to all sorts of pain and stress and all of that, but it has to be done in a progressive and measured way. You can't just go balls to the wall on this stuff. You have to be careful. But at the end of the day, and look, I was in my 20s once, I did this stuff too, but the fact is that like you don't get those brain cells back. Your brain does not heal itself. And the effects of head trauma do seem to be cumulative. And so while it's not a guarantee that you will end up with CTE or any of the neurodegenerative disorders that go along with head trauma, the fact is that head trauma has been at least, correlationally linked to it. And it's our best guess. So really, 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 if you have an instructor that is saying, let's punch each other in the face, get out of there or show him the research. And if he doesn't listen to the research, then get out of there, right? You can do all sorts of conditioning everywhere else. But please, please, please save the punching each other in the face for competition day. I mean, even in sparring, we have to make contact. We have to make threats to the head. But as I've discussed before, the majority of your sparring should be light technical sparring, which means that you should not be delivering enough force to cause any kind of considerable trauma. And in my opinion, you should be sparring at a level where you don't actually need gloves. Whether you choose to wear them or not, your intensity level should be such that if you were to be bare knuckle, you would not be leaving deep bruises and marks. So that's all I have to say on that. You don't want to look like this guy. Well, you don't want to look like this guy either. But the fact is that, come on, guys, CTE, head trauma is serious stuff. Some of it is not going to be avoidable when we're dealing in combat sports. It's just the fact of it. And the fact is, just like things that cause cancer and whatever, there's not a guarantee that you will end up with a clinical issue. It's more the fact that we know that there is a correlation there, and it's a pretty strong correlation, and we want to avoid that. We want you guys to be able to train into your 80s. One of the great things about the traditional side of the martial arts is these guys can train into their 70s, 80s, 90s, right, and still be okay. And we know, right, I haven't talked about this much, but we know that the body doesn't change all that much between 20 and 60, metabolically speaking, which means that short of injury, illness, and lack of activity, you can basically maintain for 40 years. And guess what? The studies show that up to in your 90s, it's only like a 26% reduction. So like you can be 3/4 as powerful as you were in your 20s at 90 if you just never stop training and keep up the training. You don't want something like head trauma to cut that short. So I will talk to you guys later. Take care of yourselves and good journey. Hey, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, do all the other social media stuff. You can check out our other socials as well as take a look at some of the merchandise that we have for offer in the links below. And if you happen to be in the Phoenix metro area, stop in, come in for a class, come in just to say hi. We'd love to meet you. Until next time, good journey.